Hey, good morning, everyone. I'm relatively new to this community yet, so for those of you that don't know me, I'm Dwight Stoll. I just want to start by thanking Kate and PH, and especially PH for doing a lot of the work locally on the ground here to pull this off. And also want to say, so again, for those of you that don't know the history of this meeting, prior to 2-ish years ago, this was a primarily GC meeting, and Kate and PH approached me as someone in the two-dimensional liquid chromatography community and said, "Hey, would you be interested in trying to bring some 2D liquid chromatography into the meeting?" And I said, "Of course." And so I just it's not lost on me. Still 2 years after the fact that it's really great to have been sort of for my community to have been invited to participate with this group. And I think I'm really encouraged to see the amount of liquid chromatography we have in the program. And I think the future is really bright in terms of us going forward together. And I think learning a lot from each other. I know that I've learned a lot from this community already. So our next keynote lecturer here is Dr. Bob Pirok from the University of Amsterdam. Bob did his PhD in Amsterdam as well, and he's a little bit younger than I am. It's been fun to, we've been working together quite a bit. And I just want to say that this topic here, so he's talking about sort of moving in the direction of unsupervised optimization of 2D separations. And I think, for me personally, I think this is a really important direction in the field. These days, I find myself writing and talking with Bob about sort of moving away from trial and error approaches to method development, which at least in the LC field has been how it's been for a very long time. And I think we have a lot of the know-how and ideas to try to work smarter instead of just trying to work harder all the time. So I'm really excited about this trajectory, and I think it's been interesting. So I didn't know until yesterday PH was going to talk about ChatGPT, but this is all the rage right now. Everybody's talking about AI, ChatGPT, what it can and can't do for us, but I think it's sort of in the same vein here. How can we use the knowledge, the know-how, the theory we have, and some AI sprinkled in to make our work more effective and efficient? So, Bob, the floor is yours.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you all for being here, and thanks so much for giving the chance to me to talk to everyone, to the organizing committee. I think it's also what was just said. It's really amazing that aside from this taking place right on site, that's also that it's free, right? So also for the younger generation, I think that's really amazing. So thanks a lot for making this possible. I think that's unique. So yeah, well, Dwight already gave a great introduction, so I can skip those slides. No, no, but yeah, we'll be talking about 2D-LC mainly. There's also some GC in there, and also a lot about optimization, automation, not seeking to replace us. So for the record, but I guess my main story, which is also what you will see on the conclusion slide, my main conclusion is that it's good if we take a step back, stop making even better instruments, 5D, 6D, whatnot, what you sometimes see as titles, but just use what we have. Because I don't see a lot of people around me in the industrial field, with the people that we work with, that actually get used to the LC, for example, which unlike GC is far from mature yet. So yeah, that's also what basically this research line is about. Right, so here on this plot, you see on the x-axis the information, right, that you can get out, and of course with more powerful separation technology there is a higher potential of getting information out, but of course it also costs more, not only the instrument but also, right, you all, us, and that needs to do something with this data. So yeah, this is basically the case in point also for 2D-LC. And of course, there are great innovations out there already. So that's the other thing. There is already so much in literature that we're not using. So as you will see, I will also use background correction tools that other people, maybe some here in the audience, already developed, right? We should also do the other side in science, combine instead of compete. Competition is good, but right, if we also then find synergy, that's even better. And that's also what I want to do here. I want to acknowledge the fact that much of the work that I'm doing with my colleagues and teams is actually based on a lot of work that people have already done before I was born, or right? Well, the retention models, some of them, they already then existed. I'm not that old. So yeah, also in terms of optimization programs, so let's get to business, right? I have a sample, and then the question is, okay, right, develop me a method. And then of course, there are great minds that will then take the sample and start to do trial and error based method optimization, maybe even use right literature and experience and such to do it a little bit faster. But generally you work from the sample that you have, and this is of course good, but it also takes a lot of valuable time. And so what normally method development programs that already exist that basically try to optimize this method for you do is basically work on some input data, like, well, there's these structures in there, or these descriptors of these molecules, or right. And then also, if we as humans exist these programs, then often we also need to make sure that the sample is not too complex, right? Because I cannot tell a program about 1 million molecules what's all happening. So what we typically try to do is a little bit this interpretive approach where we, well, of course we know something because, right, the column didn't magically end up in the system, but we try to be a little bit more reserved and we just don't know. And then also the other thing that of course is something that industry constantly tells to us, like if this really is going to be useful, then also make sure that it can deal with some complex samples. So this is the upstairs program, the Unleashing the Potential of Separation Technology to Achieve Innovation in Research and Society. I'm a PhD student from, or I was from Peter Schoenmakers, who always is the king of making acronyms like this. Here's some other ones. I don't know what AMX stands for anymore, but Paradise is propelling analysts by removing analytical data into sample-related encumbrances. And like this, there's these things. But yeah, so this research line that I'm talking about, we do this in close collaboration with industry through different projects. And basically, in a nutshell, what I'm going to talk about is this. So, because of course we all have an LC or a GC in our lab, I wanted to say at home. But basically, what our algorithms do, so they're installed on a computer that is directly communicating with the LC. So it is not us that are changing a method and changing the flow rate or whatnot. No. Data comes out, program handles the data immediately, and then programs a new method. And we are just standing there and drinking coffee. We is me and a lot of other colleagues that you also see on the final slide, but also that guy over there, Brian van der Speer. Hello. Who is now a PhD student at Wageningen University with Hans-Gert Jansen. But he worked also on this, so in case I am not clear, you can also ask him. He's always very happy to talk about this. But yeah, so I will show two ways this can work, with and without machine learning. And I also show you why things like machine learning, which indeed are emerging and right, they're also not the ultimate magic. They have limitations too. So let's start with retention modeling. So what's happening in a nutshell? I think most of you are familiar with retention modeling, but if not, right, let's say I have an analyte, and so here we have the retention time, and here we have phi. So right, for example, the organic mobile phase conditions, or maybe we're doing, I don't know, 50% acetonitrile separation of some analytes, and this is an analyte, and it induces at time point A. And now I increase the acetonitrile concentration, and now it will induce much earlier at time point B. Now, in this very simplistic model, you can now see that you can connect these two dots together, which of course is always possible, right? So you can draw fit a model through it. For two dots, it's simple, right? And then the idea is that this retention model describes basically what the analyte will do if you change, for example, the organic modifier. And you can also do this for gradients similarly. So basically, what the key here is that if you have a separation of, let's say, 1,000 analytes, and you know their position in method A and method B, then basically you can model the retention for each of them and then predict a different chromatogram. That's basically what this implies. So what happens is that we first do some scans. So basically we tell the instruments to just do 3 pre-programmed methods that basically try to create a crude version of a model. So LC is doing this, processing all this data, tracking the peaks, we'll get back to that, modeling all of this stuff as you see over here, and then saying, well, you know what, this is the new method you should do. And then basically the LC starts to do this, data comes out, and this basically goes on and on and on and on until some criteria has been met. I'm very vague here, and this is partially because science hasn't solved many of the things that we need here. So let's first start with some of this data. So this is an example of a scan, a simple linear gradient from 0 to 100% acetonitrile, like the most basic gradient there is of a peptide sample. And you see all of these numbers over here, and these are basically tracked peaks. So there's an MS behind this, I should say that. And then here you see the next one. So this is again 0 to 100% acetonitrile, but you see that the times are different now on the y-axis. It's different gradients. And then using the mass spec data and statistical moments that basically describe the shape of this peak, an algorithm will be able to say, well, this peak is now there and that peak is now there. Right? So this is the basis. And then once we get to iteration number 4, so iteration number 4, which is basically the first self-made method. This was a pre-programmed one. Now you actually see the gradient here depicted. And now you see this step gradient that the algorithm came up with. Then you basically see that the separation is now much more spread across the chromatogram. Right, so this is a very simple way to do this. You also see these orange highlighted peaks, and that's basically the fact that, of course, if you optimize something, then the idea is that you will separate more, right, get more information. And of course, you need to then go back to your earlier data and try to find these new peaks as well, right? Because otherwise you're only optimizing based on what you saw at the start. So basically what our algorithm is trying to do is it's being told to make such a gradient. So a very complicated step gradient, maybe more complicated than is needed, but you will see that this is not necessarily bad, which is nice, but it is also a problem because right now we have 16 parameters that we need to optimize. So basically the algorithm now needs to come up with the correct combination of 16 numbers. So this is very difficult. We didn't really know how to do this. Fortunately, Brian came up with a great idea and he said, Bob, for inspiration, we need to go to Vegas, right? Because if you're out of luck, this is basically right the luck of finding the 16 parameters, then you really need luck. And then of course this is similar to Vegas. So not we, but I went to Vegas. Didn't really get anything there. So I think lost more. But anyway, so one way that you can deal with this, and this is not new or so, this is being done often in math or like different modeling type of studies, is that suppose now I'm trying to fit this retention model, so I've used these two coefficients to fit, NK0 and S, and NK0 and S, and let's say that this is the optimum. Then basically what an algorithm is doing, it's of course starting with a random number of coefficients, and then it's trying to optimize it. So basically it's trying to get there. But if there are these suboptimal fronts, right, so local optima, then the algorithm can get stuck there. And that's what you then often see, is that you need basically to increase your luck. And this is some way you can do this here. Now, for the retention modeling, this is not so special, but for the actual optimization of the separations, it is more crucial, and I will get to that. But before I do so, I will first want to depict another problem. Because you may look at this and see like, hey, what's going on here? So these are basically this is the way we evaluate the separations. This is really a huge scientific problem for us, a huge bottleneck. I really need your input soon. So basically we calculate the resolution score. So we basically try to minimize this number. The way this is written is that the better the resolution is, right, between all of the peaks on the chromatogram, the lower this number will be, because it's 1 minus this number. And this is the same over here with the time. So basically we want, of course, the time to be limited as well, right? We don't want exceptionally long methods because then it's easy to separate any mixture. And then you actually can balance these two scores. I know this looks ridiculously simple, and it's actually needed right now. And this is, again, one of our bigger issues. So what happens is that, and now I have a lot of information on the slide. So basically we start 1000 different random 16 parameter combinations. So basically the computer is being told to create 1000 different gradient programs, and it's optimizing each of them. So all of them. So after having done this for a large number of iterations, then basically we get this. So this is only the resolution score, and these are the number, right, all of these methods. And then basically I should remember you that the lower, the better. So you can also see the vast majority of these methods is complete trash. It's completely rubbish, which makes sense, right? Because if I tell an algorithm to, right, do something random with these numbers, then there's a high likelihood, of course, that it will do something that is not good. So only the better few, so select few, the best 200, we basically take them out, and then we continue optimizing them using a genetic algorithm. Again, for a large number of iterations, so about 1500 here. And then only the best of this, we actually take and program into the LC. So this is a lot of effort based on really sketchy equations, right? To actually get to this. So what is the result? So here you see the different gradient programs, and then right, so we have 13 iterations, so 13 methods that were tried, and then these are the gradients that the algorithm came up with. And what you see is a counter to what we often get is, yeah, but if you use such a complicated gradient, right, is that really necessary? Well, no, it's often not necessary, and this is why the algorithm is barely using this at all, right? So this might as well just be a flat linear gradient. But what is really important, also if you look over here, is that this distance, right, this is a complete waste. So at some point, once all these analyses have eluded, the method suddenly steeply goes up to get the last one next to it. And this is basically an example that's for me now easy to show to you of how that works. So here you see the score again, right? So the score, this is a different score yet again. It goes up, which is really nice, right? So fortunately the scans were not that good as the end result. But you also see after that nothing is happening anymore. And this is completely in line with what we would expect from a retention model, because the retention model, right, the idea is that if you know the actual model, then of course you can add more data as much as you want, but you already know the key model. So you should already be able to predict this, unlike machine learning, which I will get back to. So yeah, here you see then this. You also see that we consistently predicted the wrong score. Right, so it actually always was lower in reality. No, we predicted it to be lower, so conservative than it actually was. And that has something to do with the fact that we have to assume peak widths and such, and we just want to be safe, so we assume them to be wider than they actually are. Okay, I also promised to talk a little bit about the machine learning side. So we use Bayesian optimization for this. If you have no clue what that is, or no clue about machine learning, don't worry, it's actually not that complicated. I will tell you. So now suppose that I just am optimizing a method that starts from a certain gradient point to a different gradient point. So remember we said we had a reverse phase separation that went from 0% acetonitrile to 100% acetonitrile. So P1 is, for example, the 0, and P2 is, for example, the 100. Right, so I'm only trying to optimize these 2 points in this example, hypothetical example. Now this surface over here represents basically what is ideal. So the actual result. So suppose that we actually know for each possible combination the end result, then basically the more yellow it is, the better. So the actual optimum we already know is here. Of course, in reality we don't, but for this example to teach you, we do. So in reality we don't know this. Now I'm doing my scans, right? So I'm doing 5 methods, for example, these 5 red dots. So I picked 5 of these combinations, and then the algorithm is basically trying to establish what the actual score plot looks like, and it gets to this. So based on these 5 data points, it's able to map the surface this way, and it looks a little bit like this, but of course not enough. So what happens next? Now the algorithm is trying to compute, okay, so where don't I know anything? So here you see in blue or dark blue, basically where it is absolutely sure, and also where it is not sure at all. So this is here at the yellow part, but also over here. So it's combining these 2 information packages. So where is the optimum likely going to be based on what I already know, and what do I already know? So then in the acquisition functions table, then this is going to be my next method. So then it is added over here. So now we have 6 data points, and now you see that the surface looks already a little bit more. And like this, it's adding points until it basically has an identical surface. Of course, it never knows this, so it should technically be able to continue forever, but yeah. So this is how it works. And similar to that, we force the algorithm to optimize a very simple, and I'm actually now emphasizing the simple 4-parameter gradient program. And for this 4-parameter gradient program, it already needed about 8 iterations to actually get to the optimum. Of course, realize we never know the actual optimum because we don't know, we don't have infinite number of measures. So after about 8 of these methods, it arrived at the optimum. After that, the score, just so connected components basically is the number of separated peaks, but then a little bit more complicated way. But then it was finished. So this may look great, like, oh, that's amazing, right? It's just 8 iterations where I just drink coffee and then it's done. So this is 4 parameters. Earlier I had 16, and I'm not including anything complicated, temperature or whatnot. So you can see already the issue appearing. Side note, incredibly important things like peak detection and background correction. I'm completely like ignoring all of them, acting as if it's like very simple, but it's not. So just want to be fair there. And then the other thing, so right, this machine learning tool is great, but only if it is able to assess what is actually good. If it doesn't know what good is, what we want, then it will not produce anything useful. So had I used the product of resolution, basically multiplying all resolution factors of the entire chromatogram together, which is something which a person in 2016, me myself, did with a different project, well, then you would have seen that it would have been complete rubbish compared to, for example, the number of connected components that I showed you before. So in a nutshell, retention modeling is really great. Scalability is amazing. So we did 16 parameters. I'm pretty sure we could have done 50 or 60 or not. But it relies on peak tracking. So you need a mass package, right? So you need to give these retention models the information that they need. And provided you also now want to tackle in other things like flow rate, temperature, and such, well, you need to be able to model it. And for that, you need more chromatograms and you need to be able to track them. So this is like, it worked now because we had nice analytes and a very good mass spec from Dwight. Right, but yeah, this is important. And it's also very sophisticated. I'll get back to that a little bit. Machine learning, it's amazing. It will always work. You can also use it for things other than LC. So like, I don't know, optimize a mass spec or a coffee machine or so, provided that you can tell it when something is good, right? So measure the concentration of caffeine in coffee. If that would be your thing, then this thing would be able to manipulate all of the parameters in such a way and then get you something that is really nice. Fortunately, there's also what is called multi-objective and multi-fidelity Bayesian optimization, where you basically put these retention models into this, and that's basically the way we see forward. Now, why we really need this is for modulation purposes. So that's a small sidetrack that I'm making before I ask you for your help. And because that's the other thing that we see that our industrial partners require us a lot for. So I think Annika Lok is here. Yes, you are. Yeah, she's like, why do you call me out? Well, that's because she did, group a long time ago, a few years ago, a project, and basically thanks to not only her but also thanks to you, we actually got to this stage where we basically used a light degradation reactor in between two LC separators. So this is 2D-LC with a light liquid quark waveguide reactor in this. Well, this all looks very nice, right? So now you can basically have a first dimension separation and then degrade off these analytes and then get a completely different sample in the second dimension. Sure, but it's also more complicated stuff. So, right, so industry wants us to make these degradation reactors so that they can basically follow the degradation in samples using separation technology, but it's making method development even more complicated. So you want to optimize this too. So this is basically the real reason why we would then do something like this. But okay, so the title actually said challenges. So what are the challenges? This is the final part of my presentation. So over here to the left, you see something that three of my PhD students obtained when they were visiting Minnesota. So Dwight's lab in November. And you see here to the left the same separation or the same sample separated as that you saw earlier with 1D. So you see this being one of the scanning gradients. How does it look? Okay, I don't know either. So the algorithm just scrunched this stuff and then came up with that over here. Looks amazing, right? I mean, more peaks. That's good. But what actually happened is what you see over here. So that's of course the other thing. You can optimize all of these things as much as you want and tell the algorithm, well, give us more peaks, right? So get a better separation. However, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the breakthrough phenomenon, right? So you get analyzed that basically do not interact with the common. All of these peaks are the same as these peaks. So this over here is a breakthrough from these peaks. This is the real separation, and this is the stuff that is suffering from the breakthrough effect. Peak splitting effects that you do not want in chromatography. They're bad. Algorithm thinks, wait, if I do this, if I maximize this effect, I will actually get more peaks. This is what you told me to do. So I'm going to optimize for this. So basically, that's what constantly happens, and that's my other thing. We know that this is going to happen, but tell that to the algorithm. And it's not as simple as saying, well, if this is my solvent in one dimension and I inject it to the other, right? There's a lot of factors here. The other thing is this. Do you like this chromatogram? Okay, I will. Yeah, I shouldn't have put the name over there because now no one will be honest. But like, which chromatogram do you like most? Which is more optimal? Which is good? Who votes for the left chromatogram? That's nice. Who votes for the right chromatogram? Oh, even less, so that's good. No, but I'm kidding, of course. Right, so this is a highly optimized method. It's, I think, one of the best methods that we have as 2D-LC community. And of course, this looks maybe good in terms of coverage, right? So the peaks are all over the place, but they're extremely broad, co-alluding all over and such. Whereas here, these are maybe not using the entire separation space, but you can fit a lot of them on there, right? So, but right here we go again. What do I tell the algorithm? Maximize the maximize this, maximize the peak capacity. And then Hans Gert will barge in and say, yeah, I don't care about peak capacity and orthogonality and such. I just want these 5 analyzes to be separated from the rest, right? So this is the other thing where we're like really bashing our heads to the wall all the time. Like, how are we teaching this thing what to do? So the group of Respect at some point wrote a really nice review on chromatographic response functions. That's basically the term that we use in literature to describe these functions that evaluate these stuff. If any of you ever wants to do a nice project, well, try to develop one and use your brain. And then finally, another thing is peak tracking. So peak tracking itself for going from 1D to 2D is not that difficult because now you actually, especially for comprehensive mode, you now have a second dimension that you can use to harvest information from and say, well, right, my peak is probably over there, right? So we have an analyte, it's going to find it in this chromatogram, and then, well, it's probably going to be somewhere over here. And for 2D, this is even more easier because you can really narrow this frame. However, if I'm doing selectivity screening in hardcut and I have multiple reverse phase separations, and I don't have a mass spectrometer, it's going to be really incredibly difficult. So we tried statistical moments to basically use this as single channel data and well, basically track the peaks. It's very difficult. At the moment, we're looking at the Fourier transform of these signals to give us more information, but this is really difficult stuff. I'm not even mentioning detecting the peaks, because if I don't detect them, I can also not track them and I can also not optimize them. So yeah, selectivity screening is definitely something that we are now more interested in looking for. And yeah, I really want to emphasize this as well. Peak detection, finding the peaks. It is really, really, really difficult to do it. Even with a mass spec, it's extremely difficult to find out these peaks. And especially in comprehensive 2D, because of course this peak will, right, eludes multiple times across different modulations, different times in the second dimension. And then you also need to group them. And based on how you're grouping them, you're going to, well, bias already this peak tracking pretty much every step that comes after that. So this is a really important part. So yeah, my main message is instead of making even more powerful separation technology, we must focus on the efforts, or most focus our efforts in improving the accessibility of what we have right now. I think then, right, we should go forward. Of course, making better columns helps because that reduces the likelihood that peaks will collude, right? So of course it's useful, but we really can do better there. So I'd like to thank, of course, the organizing committee for giving me the opportunity to talk over here, and you for your attention. These three over here are, well, they actually together were the supervisors of Brian. So here they were actually sitting well, I think across me and Trevor. Trevor is also sitting over there. And these three, well, they don't sit in the lab much. They have that in common. He's a real AI guy. He just never see any LC system. Well, he is a little bit of a hybrid. He sometimes sits in the lab, but right, you all probably recognize this feeling. They're all looking at the chromatogram and they're hoping for a peak to appear from the baseline. I mean, we all know this feeling that we're really staring for this peak to arrive. So yeah, thank you all for your attention, and if you have any questions, let me know.
I think you mentioned many challenges in the optimization of the method, but an even bigger challenge that's in the use of the method. So how can you include things like stability of the method, ability to deal with small changes in gradients, ability to deal with similar mass spectra, ability to deal with big concentration units?
Yeah, well, this is a huge issue, of course. So within one system, you can imagine that you do studies where, for example, you try to repeat the process or repeat a certain operation of, for example, pre-tracking or whatnot over multiple days. But think about, right, you have a site in Vlaardingen and then, or Wageningen, and then you also have one in a different country. So it's actually one of our main objectives in a different project. It's an innovator project, which we do with a number of pharma companies. But basically the key thing is this. This is a computer that is doing it. The computer can be connected to the internet, and through the internet it can control also a different system somewhere else. So the idea is that we tackle method validation this way, that we basically have 2 or 3 or more systems in different locations with different conditions, and then basically not only compare the end result, right? So I have an optimal method and now I try it somewhere else, but also include the 3 in the optimization. So maybe do the optimization simultaneously across 3 locations and, right, include stability parameters as such in the evaluation of what is good and what is not good.
Other questions?